There are some characters from Unstable SMP which represent each of the 7 heavenly virtues. Some of these are not who you expect. Let's start with one of the most heavenly, charity, which applies to the protagonist Parrot. While others hoarded power and resources, Parrot did something almost unheard of on Unstable SMP. He gave everything away. During his treasure arc, he traveled thousands of blocks, risked his life, and burned bridges, all to recover wealth he never intended to keep. He didn't stash backup armor, he didn't have any greedy intentions, he donated it all to the server. Parrot didn't do charity for clout. He didn't announce it, he didn't weaponize it. Even now, he could easily bring up those sacrifices to gain votes in the election, but he doesn't, because for Parrot, parity isn't a strategy, it's a belief. He genuinely thinks the server needs balance, that new players shouldn't die the moment they log in, and everyone deserves access to the same resources the powerful take for granted. In a world where strength usually comes from taking, Parrot's power comes from giving, and that's what makes him dangerous in a completely different way. But what about someone with an unbreakable mentality? Someone like FlameFrags, who is the example for Diligence. No matter how bad things get, Flame always never gives up. Gear doesn't matter, numbers don't matter, even strength doesn't matter. What matters is that he refuses to stay down. We've seen Flame pushed to his absolute limit, hunted by factions, cornered by the law, brought to near death more times than anyone can count. Could have taken the easy route. He could have cooperated, submitted, lived comfortably under someone else's rules. But Flame doesn't want safety, he wants freedom. But that choice costs him everything. He lost fights, he lost his base, he lost his name, he even lost Lomedy. For most players, that would have been the end. But for Flame, that was a new beginning. Instead of breaking, he went on a training arc. He disguised himself just to get trained by Swite. He swallowed his pride and became a student. He's been searching for Minecraft's 4 combat masters one by one. Recently, even getting trained by Manepear, who is his former friend who betrayed him. Flame's case is more based around fighting. But what if a player loses all of their friends and still refuses to lose hope? This player is Parrot. His diligence isn't based around PvP. It's easy to have a never give up mentality when you're as skilled as FlameFrags, but Parrot isn't just an ordinary player. Parrot has lost more than any other player. Parrot has watched almost everyone he cared for disappear. Friends executed by ruthless dictators, friends who sacrificed themselves, friends who slowly corrupted into something unrecognizable. What makes him different is hope. Somehow, after seeing the worst parts of the server, Parrot still believes it can be saved. Even after betrayal, even after failure, even after realizing that doing the right thing usually gets you punished. Instead of becoming bitter like the others, he chose a harder path. He chose to fight for the server itself. He went on impossible journeys, he risked his life constantly, and even when those went wrong, Parrot kept moving forward. That's not skill, not dominance, it's true diligence. What about the virtue of kindness? The perfect example for kindness is you pressing the subscribe button. Seriously though, subscribe. What about a specific person from the Unstable SMP? Someone like Egg-chan. Egg has often acted as Wembu's moral anchor. While Wembu chases power, Egg pulls him back from crossing certain lines. You can see this clearly during Wembu's training arc, when Egg insisted on helping the Ice civilization. This wasn't strategic, it didn't benefit him, it only put him in danger. Yet, he stepped in anyway, fighting the Mafia to protect players who had nothing to offer him. What makes this moment important is that Egg directly disobeyed Main's command to follow him. On Unstable, defying power usually gets you killed. Egg did it anyway, not for leverage, not for reputation, because it was the right thing to do. And this isn't a one-off. Egg repeatedly shows concern for weaker players, even when it slows him down or puts him at risk. In a server designed to crush kindness, Egg actively preserves it. That alone makes him stand out. It can be easy to be kind when you don't have that much power. But what if you have all the power, but still don't corrupt? Which is why the virtue of Chastity applies to Minitech. He guards the end to protect others, to stop players from dying recklessly, and to prevent overpowered items from being used to harm the server. Minit could have easily exploited this position. He could have hoarded the end resources or sold them at extreme prices, just like Clownpierce did with the Nether. But unlike him, Minit never let power or gluttony corrupt him. Even after losing to FlameFrags, Minit stayed consistent. He didn't re-gear using end loot or secretly gave himself an advantage. Instead, he accepted the loss and moved on. He was even willing to hand the end over to the law, not out of fear, but because he wanted peace and believed no dimension was worth endless conflict. More importantly, Minute uses power to protect, not dominate. He sheltered Egg-Chen without expecting anything in return. No leverage, no authority, just protection. That's true chastity, not the absence of power, but the discipline to never abuse it. In the same dimension, far beyond the main end island, lives Marlowe. She represents chastity in its most dangerous form. At first glance, she looks like a glutton, someone hoarding power for herself, but the reality is far more complicated. Marlowe controls the Mafia Tomb, a vault filled with enough gear and leverage to take over the entire server. With her skill and resources, she could arm players, build an army, and reshape the balance of power overnight, but she never does. Instead of exploring what she has, she locks it away and stands guard, protecting it from players who would use it for greed, war, or domination. Because the tomb isn't just storage, it's a loaded weapon. If it's disturbed, stasis chambers could activate and drag thousands of players into the void in seconds, leading to server-wide chaos and instant collapse. Marlowe knows this, and that's why she chooses restraint over control. She holds absolute power and refuses to use it. But what if you have the potential to gain a lot of power, but choose a far simpler life? Which is why Lomedy is the perfect fit for humility. He's the closest ally of FlameFrags. With that connection alone, Lomedy could farm wealth, dominate fights, and rise into influence without resistance. But he doesn't. He refuses to let proximity to power define who he is. What makes Lomedy truly humble is what he doesn't use. He owns a mace, and at one point had two. In the wrong hands, that's instant power or easy money. Lomedy never cashes it in. He never weaponizes it. He understands the consequences of power and chooses restraint over dominance. In a server driven by ambition and violence, Lomedy's humility isn't a weakness, it's discipline. But perhaps patience is the most important trait, which is why Jumper, who represents Temperance. Where others act on impulse, Jumper pauses. Even when Leowook, someone with more authority and power, pushes for immediate action, Jumper stays composed. She doesn't let emotion, fear, or impatience override judgment. That restraint is rare in a server built on emotion and revenge. The best example is Bat's hunt for Spoke. Leo believed Spoke should be killed on sight. No questions, no hesitation. Jumper stepped in and slowed everything down. She demanded clear, undeniable proof that Spoke had killed the spies. That single decision likely prevented an unjust execution, or worse, a full-scale war. Without Jumper, the server could have burned over assumptions. The same pattern showed during the director arc. Every member of Bat, except Jumper, was convinced Parrot was the director. They were ready to kill him. Jumper chose dialogue over violence. She spoke to Parrot directly, gave him space to explain himself, and helped uncover the truth. In moments where chaos was the easy choice, Jumper chose restraint. That is why a trait like Temperance is crucial. But Temperance is part of a greater virtue, patience, which applies to LettuceK. His rise wasn't fast, flashy, or clean. For a long time, the law barely mattered. He built his empire slowly, watched it fall, and rebuilt it again. Every time momentum started to form, it was ripped away, defeated by Flame, nuked by Wemmbu, or overshadowed by someone stronger. Most players would have snapped or quit. Lettuce waited. While Prince Sam and Ash Swag rose to power, Lettuce stayed in the background, watching, learning, and enduring. There was envy, sure, but envy didn't turn into recklessness. He didn't force his way into relevance. He let time do the work, and eventually it paid off. The law became unavoidable, and Lettuce became the most influential player on the server. But patience cuts both ways. What makes his story unsettling is what comes next. After waiting this long, after finally gaining power, his nice guy image is starting to crack. The restraint that once defined him feels like preparation, and if patience brought Lettuce to the top, it might also be what makes him fall, or make his villain arc so dangerous. Patience doesn't always look like waiting for power. Sometimes it looks like loyalty that refuses to break, and no one represents that better than Manepear. Spoke is the most chaotic player on the server, impulsive, unstable, constantly one mistake away from death or disaster. Anyone else would have walked away, but Manepear didn't. Instead of enabling Spoke, Manepear anchors him. He rarely complains, rarely threatens to leave, he steps in only when it matters, when Spoke starts slipping too far. When Spoke nearly killed Quackenstein, it was Manepear who stopped him, not with force, but with restraint. That's patience under pressure. Even now, as Spoke is hunted by Bat and his reputation collapses, Manepear stays, through corruption, through bad decisions, through outright evil. That's not blind loyalty, that's endurance. And in a server where people abandon each other the moment things get dangerous, Manepear's patience might be the rarest virtue of all. Similarly to Manepear, Egg-Chen embodies patience through loyalty, but taken to an extreme. Egg-Chen has stayed beside Wemmbu longer, and at a higher personal cost, than almost anyone else on the server. And that's saying something, because Wemmbu isn't just reckless, he's outright cruel at times. Egg has warned him, challenged him, and tried to slow him him down morally, but he has never abandoned him. What makes Egg's patience stand out is that he constantly pays the price of Wembu's action. He was stranded in the end because of Wembu's obsession with the Forge. Before that, he was taken hostage by Jaden, and even earlier, he was held hostage by FlameFrags. That last moment matters most. Egg explicitly told Wembu not to give up his mace, and if Wembu listened, Egg would have died. That wasn't patience from a safe distance, that was loyalty with his life on the line. If you ask the Unstable community who the most loyal ally to any protagonist is, Egg-chan would almost certainly win. Not because he's loud about it, but because he's endured more consequences than the person he's loyal to. And that's what true patience looks like. Staying even when leaving would be easier, safer, and completely justified. There are countless other examples of patience across the server, and this video can't cover them all. So tell me in the comments who else deserves to be on this list. In the Deadly Sins video, I argued that every sin doesn't just belong to individuals, but to the Unstable SMP itself, and that idea doesn't translate cleanly to the heavenly virtues. Yes, there are good people on the server, but even the good ones are flawed. In a hardcore anarchy world where everyone has one life, survival always comes before morality. Power rewards cruelty, and patience eventually turns into calculation. Time and time again, players who start as virtuous are pushed, cornered, and reshaped into something darker. Even one of the protagonists has admitted to this. Parrot once said he feels like he's the only one truly trying to help the server. On the surface, that sounds egotistical, but the uncomfortable truth is that it isn't far from the reality. Unstable doesn't preserve goodness, it erodes it. And if history has proven anything, it's that virtues don't last forever here. Sooner or later, today's examples of virtue become tomorrow's example of sin. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think the Unstable SMP at its core is good or evil? So if you'd like to watch the 7 Deadly Sins video, click the video on screen. Also subscribe to help me reach 100k, and also so you don't miss a future upload.